Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 190. The crap we forget about when building our fictional worlds. So, let's talk about crap.
Listen, do you smell that?
Shh. You guys smell that?
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And stinkily yours, I am Michael Miller.
You know, we decided after our last episode we really wanted to up our game. So we go straight
I don't know.
to crap.
This seems more like a downslope in the game department. We're
It
definitely,
kind of depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, we're definitely taking it easy since last episode was so serious, and we always ask ourselves, why so serious? So
But
this one's
just one,
a little. This is lighter fare.
Yeah, it's lighter fare, but it's just one of those things where I was just thinking about, it's like, you see a lot of similar elements in fantasy worlds, these citadels, you see cities from a distance and maybe one road through a city. But a lot of times you lose the flair of a city, and especially in lower tech level cities. And even in certain places of modern cities, they're just disgusting, smelly, and we miss that, and it's opportunity. Sometimes the spells are good. Like if you walk through an area, like with bakeries and restaurants, you go to like Hannover Street in Boston. Oh my goodness,
fresh bread.
Oh yeah, there's some spells that are
It's
good.
one of the greatest smells. Or like one of my favorite smells is like onion and garlic in a pan of oil, like at a simmer. You're not quite sautéing yet, but before the sauté. It's one of the best smells.
Have you ever been to Hannover Street in Boston?
I'm sure I have, but specifically I couldn't answer this question because I don't spend a lot of time in Boston, and it's been quite a while since I've been there. So
I will suggest to everyone who's thinking about traveling to Boston who does not know of Hannover Street, it is the Little Italy in Boston. Of course, with a name like Hannover Street, I mean, it's so obvious. And But it actually,
that's like Little Italy in New York is very small too. It's like right around Mott Street, and it's literally like a block or 2 blocks.
They claim to have the highest density of restaurants and places to get food of any Little Italy. I don't know if that's true, but literally pretty much every building on the street at ground level is a restaurant or a bakery. And just walking down the street, it's on the north end. It's up near the North Church. You've maybe been there if you've played Fallout 4. But in our Earth, it's a much better place to be.
We've mentioned it before. It's actually kind of surprising just how very many really good Italian restaurants there are in New England. It is really easy to find good Italian food in New England.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And Little Italy is pretty much anywhere, but lots of Little Italy's in New England. And lots of, even you go to weird places like Union, there'll be a good pizza place. And if you
but we're not talking
Union
about.
You get a prize. I'm getting hungry.
Probably tell you where Union is. Yeah, we're not talking about Italian food today, though. Today, mostly we're talking about poop, because.
But we will slip in a little.
Poop is funny.
Yeah, poop is funny. That's right.
My wife and I. Just recently we're talking about, I forget how we got onto it, but I got onto the subject, and I think she brought it up. I don't think it was me, but I steered it towards how farts are inherently funny. The word fart is funny. The sound that farts make are funny. Like if you go to a child who has no basis, and I'm talking like an infant who has no basis of comedy. Like they haven't even evolved enough to understand what comedy is. And you just go and make a fart sound, they will giggle. They will always giggle, which to me reinforces the fact that farts are inherently funny. Oh, I know how my wife got onto this subject. My wife works in a physical therapy office, and she is their Pilates instructor. And when you're doing Pilates or yoga or any position-based exercise, you can put yourself in positions where you cannot pinch. And it is very common for people to be doing a position, whether it be on a Pilates reformer or just doing mat Pilates or doing yoga, where they'll they'll fart because they can't hold it in based on the position. They don't have the leverage, or the muscles are situated in a way that you can't pinch it off, and people will just fart. And my wife has to remain professional. She can't just bust a gut laughing, and she says sometimes it's hard because some old lady will like turn or bend over and then just and she won't be able to address it. She wants to giggle. See, you just giggled just there.
Well, see, as a Midwestern man, I never really understood that. To me, farts happen when they happen.
But laughing at a fart,
but I
or
guess a lot of people don't.
No, what don't you understand? Laughing at a fart or pinching a fart?
Pinching. Laughing,
a fart.
yes, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. So,
all right.
Farts and world building, Jeff, get us into it.
So now let's get into waste. And here are some things that I think that sometimes show up as set settings, but I don't know how well they're always thought through. Sometimes very well, sometimes not well at all. Like the waste receptacle scene in Star Wars where they all get dumped into the trash compactor. To me, it should have been a much nastier scene than it was, but it was a PG movie from the 70s, so I guess you got to give it a break. But
and you also don't know what, like, I mean, that could have just been all commercial waste. Like the garbage
maybe there was a
cans,
recycling thing set up through there. Yep.
The garbage cans at my work don't tend to be very gross because it's a lot of cardboard. It's a lot of industrial stuff. So like metals and wire and styrofoam packing materials. So it doesn't tend to be disgusting. If they were in an area where there was a lot of, like, maybe if they were near the kitchen, where
but
everyone on the
Death Star.
I know. I'm saying somewhere on the Death Star there are kitchens.
There's maybe a much nastier room.
Yeah, I'm sure their garbage is probably pretty gross.
All right. So, but these are also things to think about in general too, because especially in low-tech settings from the modern age, you don't think much about, but where do you go to the bathroom? It's like in your hut? Probably not.
Before we get too granular, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about here is a little granular, I want to caution you all to take a lot of what we're saying into consideration in the respect that we want your world to be believable, and there are certain things that you should think about from a practical standpoint. But at the same time, we don't want to advocate over architecture. We don't want to advocate you making everything work exactly as it would in the real world and sacrificing time you would spend on your world building or your story writing for it. However, these are things that we think about and we think that should be considered in your world because people poop.
Because we think crap. Yeah. So, okay, now we're going to get right into the shit.
I am Hobgoblin Slayer. My name is Norgoth. And you got to excuse me. I had burritos for lunch.
Oh, God. Sorry.
I've been pinching this one off for about 6. Well, where's the latrine?
The Dungeon Master said you were coming. I should have gone earlier. I apologize. Now, but really, where do people go to the restroom? This is something once again, you don't need this for your whole world, but where the story takes place, that's an issue. It's something worth thinking about. Where do they go to the restroom? You got to deal with that waste. And here's another one that always caught me, and this is definitely one that I thought about more from my gaming side of things. But so often in games, it was called Dungeons and Dragons for a reason. You go into these caves, which had dungeons as part of them, or these areas, and like you'd walk in and, to add, an element, there'd be like 1 million bats that you would have to like walk through as they're flying out at your sound. And then you walk into the room, and if you go to a cave on Earth that's full of caves,
a literal bat cave,
there is an ecosystem around the bat poo. There is a whole ecosystem. Anything that deals in waste will go in there. Animals will get killed by other animals. It's its own ecosystem. But when you walk into the cave, luckily, you don't have to walk through this literally giant pile of poop.
Yeah, there would be. You got 1 million bats, lots of guano.
And I think that lots of guano. And that's one of those things I think
Bruce Wayne would have a tough time keeping Alfred busy cleaning up the bat crap in the Batcave.
Alfred should have been on the Dirtiest Job show.
And the funny thing is, I just said bat crap and meant it literally, but it would be funnier if he was talking about Bruce Wayne's crap. The Batman's here to bat crap.
I'm bat crapping.
Where's the bat toilet paper? Why is it shaped this way? This is really inconvenient.
Well, it fits in the utility belt that way.
Bat shaped.
That's part of the utility belt. And it's like a roll hanging off.
Looks like, yeah, right. Just logos on it.
But and that's one thing you can have fun with if you wanted to do a story, just have some fun too, where you set up this sort of classic dungeon cave dwelling. Add that in there because people probably won't expect it. Because you see lots of cave and dungeon dwelling, and very literally is there wasted in any of those things. What happens to roadkill? And granted, this probably is a more modern issue, but I would imagine occasionally, even with horses going down paths, that would be an issue traditionally, but probably not as much. But how do you deal with it? Where do the bodies go? Does it shovel it out on the side of the street? Which probably, or is there a mechanism for it? Is that mechanism being abused by like a criminal syndicate to push drugs on your society? Could be.
I'm sorry. Are you talking about the removal of the roadkill?
Roadkill,
or
yeah.
So they take the roadkill and they fill it with drugs and then use that as a means to transport.
Or they use the people who deal with the roadkill to distribute drugs into more rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a thought. Much like in movies, and I don't know this because I'm not a crime lord, and
that's his story, and we're both sticking to it because I certainly am not an enforcer for his crime syndicate.
He's
definitely not.
Story.
Definitely not.
And we don't know this, but it could happen that people who try and sell drugs would use people who go around the city like trash men to deliver those drugs throughout the city. Could happen.
Could happen.
But once again, could your roadkill system be a way it gets distributed out into the country?
I mean,
Just a thing to think about.
I don't know what it's like in other countries, but ice cream men in the United States that is a notorious way to deal drugs. It is.
Can I get the special Oreo swirl? I would imagine anytime you have something that you expect to see moving around, these are possible ways to happen. And I'm picking the nasty ones mainly in this episode. But once again, there's a whole range of things that you can think about. But I'm just picking out ones that caught my attention.
So what about garbage pits? You figure people get garbage, even in a tech level where there is no like packing material. If somebody kills a rabbit and then skins the rabbit and they use the pelt for something, but they strip it all and they boil most of it and they end up with a stew, there's still bones. There's still there's still some waste. Or
maybe they utilize it somehow, but how do they utilize it? What happens to all of the bits and pieces?
Oh, but I'm just referring to stuff whatever stuff doesn't get used, whatever is garbage, where does the garbage go?
Mm-hmm. And this is the little garbage. We're past the bathrooms, people. We're past the bathrooms.
Yes. We might get back to poo, but...
Is there a big pit? As a soldier, that's one of the big concerns, right? Because if you're out maneuvering in the countryside, you don't want people to find where you were. So how do you dispose of waste as a soldier? And for bonus points, if you go to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft and ask me, I will tell you how soldiers, at least when I was in, would deal with garbage. And the environmentalists from the previous episode might not like the answer. But it was dealt with.
What my guess is bury it or burn it.
It's more to it than you would think.
Really?
And you would definitely not burn it. But you'd have to go to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft. If you ask me there, I will answer the question.
So join the Facebook group.
Or I know there's at least one other veteran in there who could probably answer it as well.
Let me check our list real quick because we may have some shout outs. Yeah, we got a couple shout outs. We actually, so we've got Sturdy Knight. I had to put the full name in there because I thought that was interesting. Sean, KJ, Jeffrey, and Courtney. Welcome to the show, guys, or welcome to the Facebook group. We've had a steady increase of population on the Facebook group, and it's really great. Seeing a lot of fun conversations, a lot of people being very encouraging.
A lot of new active people. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of activity. Like, there's definitely a portion of our community that I'm sure you're familiar with the term lurkers, people who just kind of sit there and they read. So we got our lurkers too, but we've got a lot of nice active members too. So come join us at the
Come
Facebook
join
group,
the
guys.
fun. And if you want to learn how to deal with that waste, that garbage of a modern day soldier, I'll let you know, but only there. Only there.
So Jeff, what about forgotten city scopes?
You mean scapes. I can't believe you just used the wrong word.
It says scopes, so I'm reading it off of your show notes.
Yeah, prove that to the audience.
That's why I don't go by the show notes, because you
fake.
always write them wrong. So tell us
do it
about
to
your
test
city
you,
scopes.
so I could be
Scopes.
impressed with you actually using
Scopes. It says scopes, and now you're going to tell me about scopes, not scapes.
I don't know about scopes, but I'm going to move on to scapes because that's the correct term that Michael is lying that is completely spelled correctly there.
It's an O, not an A.
No, it's not. Now, what just happens when it rains? You know, especially if you're in a densely populated city, you know, Rome had sewers. Not all cities had sewers. What happens to the rain? You know, how does it get out? You know, it could be sewers. And are they sewers like we have in modern day where they're probably really small? You know, you're probably not moving through sewers today unless you're in a fictional setting where all sewers today are roughly the size of a train track, a subway line. Or is it like ancient Roman sewers, which if you go on some of those, you see pictures of some ancient Roman sewers. They look like freaking palaces. I mean, not with the detailing in them, but the size of them. You're like, holy cow, this is a sewer?
Like
But of course, their sewers have lasted for like, you know, several thousand years at this
like
point.
Ninja Turtles size sewers.
Yeah. They're the ones that make the ones in current day movies that are oversized look ridiculously small.
It always cracks me up is when you see, when you see sewer systems in movies, they always look gigantic. Most sewers do not look like that. Most sewers are very small.
And the further you get away from, you know, the main lines, the smaller and smaller they get. So they're not like these massive networks. I'm sure in some of the older cities, they're probably bigger sewers, but I would imagine there's a lot less of those than what people would imagine. And once again, that's just my opinion. And once again, if you do have sewers, do they treat the stuff that goes in them? You know, what's that look like? How is that dealt with? Because once again, I can see lots of story elements happening in a waste treatment facility at the end of a sewer. It's a good place to do some later activities that we'll get to.
Yeah, water treatment facilities, having been in a number of them myself, I've been in a bunch of them. There are areas in a water treatment facility that are some of the most unpleasant environments I have ever been in. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's funny about the olfactory senses is that your body your brain has a built-in thing. Like when you're getting a stimulus, eventually your conscious mind will ignore it. And when it comes to the olfactory sense, it takes about 20 to 25 minutes. So if you're being barraged by a smell for a certain amount of time, eventually it won't smell so bad because your brain's like, okay, yeah, I got it. There's a smell.
Yeah.
So the thing that's interesting about that is that if you leave that environment, even for less than a minute, really briefly, your brain has to rebuild that 20 to 25 minute tolerance to that smell again. It's not like you can step out and step back in and then you're good because your brain's like, oh yeah, I remember this. We were just dealing with this. No, it resets that internal counter, that internal clock. So when we were doing work in this one particular water treatment facility, I was working in the poop room where there is literally a chute coming out of the ceiling dropping into a semi-tractor trailer that just fills with excrement that has come through a processing room where it gets sorted, it gets burnt, so baked basically. So it's like baked poop, and then it gets dropped into this semi-tractor trailer that fills up with crap before it leaves the water treatment facility. So you can imagine how terrible that room smelled. So we went into that room and they're like, all the lights in this room need to be switched out. And I was the one that got lucky enough to do that. And it's not just the smell. It's also, you figure when you're dealing with something that's dropping out of the ceiling, there is a small film of years and years of that product being dropped from a height, and then so you've got this like film of crusty and grossness, and so like everything's disgusting. You don't want to touch anything, but you have to. And then it was like, oh, we forgot something on the truck. After having been in there for like 40 minutes, it's like, oh no. So you leave, and after being in there for that long, it wasn't so bad. But then you leave the room and you step back inside and you're like, oh my gosh, it is so terrible in here. It's like so hard to deal with the smell because it's so overpowering. But, you know, that's what it's like in a real water treatment facility. At least that room. There's plenty of other rooms that weren't bad.
And here's one of the big things I want to keep in your mind as you go ahead. Some places like, you know, there's a lot of room. It's easy to deal with stuff. You can ship it out to where you have a larger space to deal with it. But speaking of that kind of a facility, I saw one on a documentary, and I don't remember the name or anything, but it was New York City's waste treatment, or at least one of their waste treatment facilities. How do you deal with it in a place as tightly compact as New York City? It's not like you could build this giant facility.
How do you get it out of there?
How do you get it out of there? You know, but they have to turn essentially a high rise or a portion of one into this waste treatment facility. And there was one room that is, I believe, one of the world's largest indoor rainforest, because it's one of the last rooms, if not the last room, as it's getting put back into the water supply. But there's just so much moisture and humidity that it will rain indoors.
Wow.
And there's an ecosystem appearing in there because of they just don't have the space, and they can't really have open windows, and so a lot of the things you can do in other waste treatment facilities can't even consider there.
The other thing to think about in a water treatment facility is there's a lot of very dangerous environments between the gases, between the chemicals. There's a lot of chemicals used in the treating of water, and also the fact that you've got these huge pools and vats of water in different stages of being treated. If you were to fall in, and most of these only have like a railing or maybe just posts with chain draped between the posts. So if you're not heads up aware, it would be very easy to fall into these pools. Some of them don't even have ladders to climb out of them. So if you were to fall in...
As we've learned from Batman, this is how supervillains are created too, so be careful.
And the great number that I have been, like we had one customer where they must have had 20 facilities, and I had installed equipment in almost all of them. And a lot of these facilities are manned by very few people. Like there'd be a massive, like, you know, the facility itself would take 3-4 acres, just the facility, not including all the land around it and some of the tanks that are outside. But if you were to fall into one of the tanks, you better be able to get yourself out, because there's like nobody around. There might literally only be 3 people on the entire, you know,
shift or whatever.
Well, on the entire piece of property, and they might be a building away on a second story in a testing room, or, you know, in a treatment room or whatever, you know.
Yeah, but you know, part of it too is not just the types of disgusting environments we're coming up with, but it's what is the space in the area that you're dealing with that they can put it, you know, and how do they make the modifications to make it work? Because you can create unique settings, which add some real grit to your world. Sorry. Now, but once again, thinking more about water, I'm going to skip one for a second. You know, how do you even get clean water? You know, I mean, are there just wells dug throughout your city? Or if you're even on the countryside, you know, think about this, you know, like the island of Bermuda. If you ever have a chance to go to Bermuda, go to Bermuda. It's a beautiful place. They have no natural fresh water sources on the entire island. And people live there year round and have for a really long time. How do they do that? And I'm not going to give you the answer here.
Some sort of salinization, I imagine.
Nope. Because think about it, they've been doing this, you know, Bermuda's been a strategic spot in the Atlantic.
Or desalinization, rather.
For a long time. But actually, it's roofs. They have a sewer system where it's a freshwater sewer system. So sewer is the wrong word. So essentially, whenever it rains, it hits the roof. There are like holes in the roof, and the water collects and goes down into a centralized basin where the water can be stored up over time to get them through most of the year when there isn't rain.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure they're looking at stuff like desalination now, but Bermuda was probably more important in the age of the big sailing ships, because that's one of the currents would take you past there if you're coming from Europe to the New World, to the Americas. So just one of those interesting things. But how do you even get the clean water? Especially in arid areas, like Libya has really large underwater aquifers, which is great because most of it is this really horrific, very dangerous dry desert. But underneath it is massive amounts of water. I'm assuming they still are. But now, going back, Michael, would someone want your pee?
Everybody wants my pee, Jeff. My pee tastes wonderful. It smells like chocolate pudding on even days and roses on odd days. So
let me make that a broader question then.
Okay.
Would people want to do something with the pee? Is there a value to pee? Would people actually want like my pee, other people's pee?
Well, there's a reason my pee is called liquid gold, Jeff. It's very valuable.
That's why I'm shifting this off to like my pee or other people's pee.
Oh, your pee is disgusting. Like it's gross.
Yeah.
It's smelly. There's a stink to it. You should probably talk to a doctor. At least you should drink more water.
I got a coffee. No.
Doesn't count.
The reason I bring this one up,
why would somebody want to keep pee?
This is what I learned, and I don't know enough, and I'm afraid to do more research. And I'll give people bonus points for doing the research on this one. I know in ancient Rome there would be like these big buckets outside of stores where you could go pee. And yes, the idea is disgusting, but urine is considered an abrasive, and so it was used to do ancient Roman laundry. Now, I assume they had to do something to remove the smell, because I can't imagine wearing clothes that were peed on several times. But it was the abrasive part of how they cleaned clothes in ancient Rome. And that wasn't used universally by any stretch of the imagination, but there could potentially be a reason and a value to something as simple as pee, especially when you go back in time. Now that you can get soap, I'm pretty sure no one uses the pee thing anymore. But if you're ever out and need to clean your clothes, don't use pee. Don't use pee unless you figure out how the Romans did it.
And don't pee on jellyfish stings either. That's BS too.
I did not hear that one, but I'll take it.
You've never heard of that? Like if you get a jellyfish sting, you're supposed to pee on it? No, that's a wives' tale. That's not true.
Well, once again, I grew up in Indiana, so it's like those
probably
are
not
mythical creatures.
probably not
like unicorns.
Probably not a big jellyfish threat in Indiana.
No.
Anyway, so what happens if there is major damage to a city in your fictional world?
Now, this is one that I thought about, and this is kind of going back to the garbage thing, but a bit different. You have this massive siege of like King's Landing in Game of Thrones. You have cities that have massive fires that sweep through them on Earth and in fictional realms. What do you do with all of the crap that's there after the fire before you can rebuild on it?
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
I thought of this too. Like, what did they do? Like, there must have been a lot of construction and what have you to clear all of the citadel that had been blown up. Stuff like that.
They don't deal with it, and that hurts me. But what do you do? Like, you go to an empty quarry and you fill it back in? I don't know. It's an interesting one, though, I think.
I think they probably reappropriate the stones, just build something different out of them.
If they can, yeah. I'm sure if they can, they do. And that would probably be the best way to do it. But if they're shattered, like
well, of course, yeah.
explosion,
if they're shattered, then they'll have to, make them smaller, reshape them, give them a new purpose. Where's the quarry master? Bring in the masons. They'll probably use them to do laundry. They'll cover them with pee and figure something out.
Yeah, definitely. You want to cover them in pee, but not Michael's pee. It's too valuable for other purposes.
They're way too valuable. Yeah.
It's a medicinal.
You should see the tank at my house that I keep all my pee in. It's pretty big. I'm gonna be able to retire early.
Be careful. Someone might try and rob you if you say that.
I know. I mean, it's not on the premises. I have it somewhere else. I have it stored in a storage locker somewhere else.
In my Google Drive.
Look at like I die prematurely, and then they find this cache of keys and swipe cards that are at all these different storage locations throughout the state, and all of them are filled with vats of urine.
I was kind of just thinking, like, you know, like those old, like, especially like Scrooge McDuck swimming.
Why did this guy
through the
save
money.
all his piss? Like, there's nothing here. There's just tanks and buckets filled with urine. It stinks in here.
Hey, Bob, have you tasted this? It's delicious.
This one over here smells pretty good. I think this one was from another person. This one smells like roses, kind of.
Here's another good one. And there's always, you know, it's like, where do you dump the bodies? And this one, I think, is a bit more obvious if the city has a river.
People die,
but I'm not even talking about the legitimate deaths, but this is something that is dealt with differently.
Oh, you're talking about the seedy deaths, the ones you got to cover up.
Here, I'll be more specific to the seedy deaths, because you can get to cemeteries, and those two kind of vary. You know, especially like if you're in an area that tends to flood, you do not bury bodies in the ground, because a rising water table would cause issues. Even though it'd be interesting to be there the first time that happened. But when you go to other, you know, but yeah, city wise, you know, once again in Rome, the sewers maybe, the Tiber definitely. Where do you dispose the bodies?
You bury them under another body. That's always, I always liked that one.
This next one really disgusted Michael here.
Well, this next one confused me because we were talking about poo, urine, water treatment, and body dumping. And then Jeff has cheese baths written. Now, you did not hear me incorrectly. A bath of cheese baths is what he has written. And Jeff, please explain why you wrote cheese baths in this list.
Essentially, if you've ever seen an industrial, and by this I mean even a cottage sort of industrial way you produce cheese, you have this giant tub, and it's relatively flat that you fill up with milk, and you have to literally have it set there and for hours for the cur and whey to start to separate. I'm sure you have to apply heat to it somehow. I don't know all of the details to it, but it's a very long and a smelly process. And in the end, you get this wonderful cheese, which you then have to store some of it even longer. Some of it has to become inhabited, which means it's full of like bacteria and crap. But like your blue cheeses and stuff like that, those are all inhabited cheeses. They have other life forms living in them. It takes a while to get to that state. Where does that happen in your town? And I use cheese as one because I love cheese. And it also contrasts all of the other things that we've talked about in this episode. But it's also leading to the next one is, where does stuff get made? You know, you never see them walking through the iron forges of the Citadel of the Red Citadel. Where do they get their swords from? You know, and typically you have these huge forge complexes in societies. Are they in the city? Are they outside? Are they shipped there? Is there maybe a smaller one in the Citadel? Where do you get all of the swords from? Where do you get your concrete, your garmum, I think is the way you pronounce it, which is really nasty fish oil. And it was one of the most valuable commodities in the ancient Mediterranean. And it's, you like literally chop up fish like sardines, and then after you clean them, and then you would take some of the guts and fish eggs, and you would put it back in there. And I think you added probably olive oil or something, I don't know. And you would let it sit out in the sun for days. And then they would use the sauce that would come out days later through this whole process of nasty fish decaying in the sun, and they would put it back on their food. But, you know,
it always amazes me how we have created such complicated processes to create a given thing, especially when it comes to food. Different
and
sauces.
Who tested it out?
Foods. How did they figure it out over time?
It
amazes me.
You chop it up and you leave it there for a day, and then you it's not ready yet.
Like even cheese.
How do you get through that?
Like cheese made improperly tastes horrific. So it's like somehow it was created, I can only assume by accident one time, and someone tried it and was like, wow, this actually this is actually really good. We can do something with this. How do we replicate it? And then they started doing it trial and error. Now,
or you get into stuff
I'm
like
sure
mushrooms.
someone could look this up and prove me wrong and come to the Facebook group and tell me that I'm an idiot when it comes to cheese making. I'm not a cheesemaker. I have no idea. But the point is that like there's so many complicated processes when it comes to creating these things, and it baffles me how we figured it out.
But here's another one too that always got me: mushrooms and snails. Who figured those out?
Snails are gross.
Not only forget if you like them or not. If a snail is eating something that's toxic, and you eat a snail that has been eating a toxic plant, it is very bad for you. From my understanding, it takes days to properly prepare snails to consume as escargot. Days.
Not worth it.
But once again, who figured that out? And who's the poor guy? Some guy, Bob. Bob is my poor guy here.
Yeah.
Bob, eat this mushroom.
Or blowfish.
Blowfish, yeah. Who figured? Because that one's really, that killed him bad.
Yeah.
Let's try it a little bit different, and now you eat it.
Try a different spot. How about this part of the fish? How about this part of the fish? How about this part of the fish? You know?
Okay, we found one spot.
Here, there's a little
our
taste,
200 volunteers
little
who
tasty
did not
spot.
make it, but we found this one tasty spot if you prepare it correctly.
There was a great Simpsons bit where they had like Homer wants to try. I believe it's called mofongo. Is the blowfish?
That's the name of the dish.
I believe so, mofongo, if I'm remembering correctly. And he wanted to try it, and please forgive me if I'm saying that wrong or if I'm choosing the wrong word, but I want to say that's what it is. And the sushi chef was new, and he's got a picture of the blowfish where, you know how like when they have a cow breakdown and it shows you this is the flank and this is the whatever. So it's got a breakdown of the fish, and it's like deadly, 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 tasty fish. It's got this little section in the middle. It's like tasty fish, you know? And the guy is trying to follow this poster chart, and he's trying to cut the fish up.
Yeah. but really what we're kind of trying to get to here, talking about cheese baths and these different materials that need to be processed, is where do they happen? Could they be some kind of setting that is used in your story?
Or characters that are involved in these processes.
Yeah. But now moving on from there is, you know, things that smell great. Like, what does your rose garden smell like before they bloom? Or your field of corn? You know, there's manure in those things, right? So, you know, think of the smells too. You know, rose gardens are great when they're bloomed, but before they bloom the first time, they're using a lot of fertilizer to make it. You know, especially earlier on before they could create fertilizer that doesn't stink. A rose garden might smell like something else.
Yeah.
And here's my favorite one, and this is the favorite one, the one you need to walk away with here understanding. What about the pig pens?
Yes.
Because not only are they messy and dirty animals, they are omnivores.
They're dangerous.
And dangerous.
They are dangerous.
Farmers die, and there's a great piece of fiction here called Deadwood. And the preferred
I wasn't even going to go there. I was going to go
I'm going there.
Snatch.
I mean, because it happens accidentally where if you get killed as a farmer, the pigs will start to eat you. But now, if you go to like Deadwood, going back to dumping bodies, he would dump his bodies in the pig pens. They'd just chop up the bodies and chuck them in for the pigs. And the pigs would consume and get rid of the bodies. That's how they dump them.
Always be wary of pig farmers.
Yes, and always be aware of pig farmers. If you ever start pig farming, realize that, especially if they're the really big pigs, you can actually get killed and eaten by your thing that you're trying to eat.
It happens.
Actually, I consider that fair.
It happens from time to time. You have to realize a lot of people, like when they hear the term pig, your average person who may not be aware might be thinking of like Babe, and this is like the size of a dog, or maybe even a large pig. Like, ooh, it's like 200-300 pounds. Pigs can be like 600 pounds. They can be really, really large. And you got to figure an animal that big's got to, feed itself. It's got to support that, that body size.
Much like dogs, if left alone and they get hungry, if you're even alive, I would have a tendency to bet once they got hungry, you're consumable.
There's I read a story not too long ago about a farmer in Seattle who is just an older guy, and I don't know if he their theory, because they did not find a body, their theory is that he may have had a stroke or something that caused him to pass out or keel over in the pen while he was feeding the pigs, and that was that. His wife had gone to bed, and the pigs ate him because there was a lot of them and they were very large.
Yeah.
And not only that, when you're talking about livestock can hurt a person really easy just by shifting around. I mean, you get stepped on by a horse, you're going to feel that. It's going to break toes. You're talking about, an animal that weighs, 800,000 pounds. If a cow just turns around quickly and bumps into you, it's going to throw you. You know what I mean? They're big.
Which leads me to the last one here, which is, and I want to skip the second part of the or. It's not important. Animal doctors, veterinarians, and farmers would probably have performed a lot of this work earlier on. And I'm not talking about like little things like chickens, because if there's an issue. But what happens if your horse, which is an expensive animal to raise, is having trouble delivering a new pony? You have to help it.
A foal.
And actually, I've seen some fiction on Earth going back to like British, the 19th century British stuff where they get into stuff like this, But I mean, there's stuff you have to deal with, when you have these big animals, and they're too expensive. You can't afford to lose them typically. So the larger they get, the more of a promise becomes. If you watch nature shows about them trying, I think is it rhinos they're trying to impregnate. And they go and they shoot these rhinos, and then they and the male ones they're trying to get semen from, and then they're trying to impregnate the female ones because the numbers are so low that they're trying to keep the species alive, and they're not very good at doing it on their own. So the humans are actually intervening, shooting them with tranquilizers. We'll say appropriating the semen from the male ones and delivering it to the female ones when they're not doing it on their own. But it's like,
tell us about this job. Tell us about this job, Jeff. We know you interned with us over the summer.
It was fun. Hold on, just another minute.
That's like world's deadliest guess right there. What did you do for the summer in Africa? I was a rhino semen appropriator. A what? I jerked off rhinos.
Yeah. Just take another minute. Don't worry. Okay. But think about that. I mean, it's like you have to worry and deal with this stuff if they're in your world. If you have these animals, these cattle that people use for food, how do you get the food to the people? There's all these kind of things that you don't need all of this stuff in your world. And Michael touched this earlier on, but it's stuff to think about to flesh out your world, and it gives you clever ways to insert details that make it seem more real,
believable. Mm-hmm.
And to make it seem more alive to people. And that's, for me, when I read this stuff, it's the stuff that makes the worlds come alive that excite me. It's the details. Don't cover these all and ignore them if you don't want to deal with them at all. But not only can it give you new settings, it can give you new ways to come up with clever ideas to set up your criminal syndicate who go out and act as semen appropriators for rhinos. I mean, whatever.
And then, of course, whenever the bodies come around, they're going to bring them to the pig farmers. Of course. I lost my train of thought in there somewhere. I'm not surprised based on how chaotic this conversation is. No. I was totally off of the rhino masturbation. There was two words you don't hear very often put together.
Only here on the anvil.
Something about animal doctor. Oh no, it was something about when you were talking about the devil's in the details. There are fictional worlds that I have been exposed to that just seem ridiculous because things didn't seem to make sense, whether it be because of their physics or because of logistics, whatever. There's just there's all kinds of different details that you can get hung up on that will prevent the story from seeming legitimate. But there's also stories that I've watched and whether it be a movie or read a book or a game or whatever, where things were incredibly fantastical, but because of the nature of how they detailed things, or they just set things up in a way where it seemed like a livable world, a breathing, living thing, a place that you could actually go and visit. And that is the thing that carries me into fiction, is something where it's like, wow, I could totally see being here. Like, this seems real.
And, it's like, and a lot of the things we do think about, languages and cultures and countries and that kind of stuff, but it's much dirtier than that in reality. And everything doesn't need to be this way. I don't think everyone needs to deal with poop in their world. Don't get me wrong, but it's just things to think about the unordinary. Because those are the things that can help just add in that little more detail to make your setting seem that much better. And it's not just the sights, it's the sounds and smells that you can work into the written word. It's hard to do smells. You couldn't deliver a real smell issue in King's Landing and Game of Thrones in the movie or in the TV show.
Like, what does wildfire smell like?
Yeah. But you can get into that kind of stuff when you write, and those are the things that will really bring your world alive. Like,
does wildfire smell like gasoline? Does it smell like burning chemicals? Does it smell like burning wood? Like, what does that smell like?
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the world builder task for today?
Feed off all of the old dead characters. This could be PCs that you've killed off as a game master, or characters for your book. Feed all of the dead ones off to pigs.
But name the pigs, and you got to make sure to chop them up, because you don't want their bone. You don't want the bones hurting the pigs, because they'll eat them bones and all. You don't want them to hurt their digestive system. So cut up those bodies real good.
We want these pigs to be well fleshed out characters too.
Yeah. And the real world task for today is learn more about working pig pens into it says learn more, but I think you mean work more about work the pig pens into a story.
Well, I guess I was saying learn more about the pig pens to work into your story, but it makes more sense what you said.
Okay, so learn more about pig pens and work pig pens into your story. That seems a little bit like a world builder task, but I think your last one is a better thing to end on. Is real world task for the day is start watching Deadwood. Well,
and the point there being that's how you learn about how to work the pig pens into your story better, is watching Deadwood. And this is another one. If you have HBO, it's an HBO series, so it's on their app. Or go to the show notes, and I'll give you a link to Amazon Prime. I believe it's free on Amazon Prime too. So go check it out on Amazon Prime. Definitely go use our link. That helps out the show as well. So I want to thank you guys very much, and enjoy your Deadwood.
Before we let you go, I just want to throw it out there. Hearthstone has a new set that by the time this episode airs for you guys, will have released. I'm a big Hearthstone player, so if you guys want to come to the Facebook group, contact me. I'll play some Hearthstone with you, and Destiny is going to be dropping soon, and I will definitely be playing Destiny too. I've already prepaid for it on the Xbox One, so if you guys want to play some Destiny with me, and I already know at least one person in our close Facebook group who will be playing with me, so.
Now, quick question. Are pig pens involved in either one of those two games?
There are definitely pigs in Hearthstone.
Pig pens.
I don't know if there are pens.
I don't know. I'm disappointed.
And I would say, as far as I know, there are no pig pens in Destiny.
So I guess it's okay that there aren't pig pens in every story, but there should be.
Yeah. So Jeff is not advocating either of these games, but I am. Yeah. Because of their lack of pig pens.
Because of the lack of pig pens. That's the only reason.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.